Jumbo Espresso Talk Today community. It's Alma Robin here. Aquaba to the Espresso Talk Today podcast show. Welcome to the Espresso Talk Today show. This is a slightly different, actually very different show this week. I know, I say that every week, and it is true every week. This show is different because it's about me. Well, let me explain. I have received so many questions, thoughts, and observations from the Espresso Talk Today community members. They were asking, where did I go to college? Why do I live in Belgium? How did that happen? What's it like? Is there racism in Belgium? Why did you start the Espresso Talk Today podcast show? So many questions, and I get that. I've given people a peek into my life and my experiences, but in general, I've kept my cards close to my chest. Hey, I'm an introvert, so it just feels right. But I also appreciate you guys so much, and I realize that being part of a community is a give and take situation. It's a wonderful collaboration of hearts and minds. Every week, you all listen to me and our great guests talk about different issues. Many of you share your thoughts and experiences with me. I really appreciate that. And some of your experiences are painful. And I know that it must be difficult to share. But you do. And that takes so much courage. I'm getting to know you better every season. But you're not getting to know me. So I decided that I need to be willing to show the courage that you've shown me and the love that you've shown and open my heart and life to share with you. So that's what today's show is about. This is how we'll do it. Esteemed Espresso Talk Today team member Hans Hippolyte will conduct the interview. Isn't that better than just reading my resume? Well, I hope you agree. Hans has been here from jump, and he was happy to put me in the hot seat for an uncommon interview. He chose all the questions. No, he didn't share them with me beforehand. Everything that you're hearing today is real and unscripted and unedited. He chose some of the questions that have been sent to us several times. So these questions come from you. Also, I wanted you to know where ETT is going from here. This is the last season of, let me back up. This is the last episode of our third season of publication. This has been a wild, fun, difficult sometimes, sad sometimes, challenging always, and simply amazing 3 years. There have been lots of changes. Some things have stayed the same though, but our mission to bring you uncommon information and discuss uncommon issues important to the Black community will never change. It's just going to get better. So next week, we will begin our 4th season. That's right. Let me say a huge asante sana to all of you. I appreciate you so much for being on this journey of love and healing and growth with me. And yes, Doug is on this journey with us too. He's with the ancestors now, but he'll always be in my heart, and he'll always be my big brother and my co-founder. So keep sending those questions, please. I might answer them on the podcast show or on Instagram at Espresso Talk Today, or on our Facebook group at the Espresso Talk Today forum, or I might just DM you. But I read all the messages and I'll answer them somewhere. I'm finished now. So let's get this party started. Hey, Hans.
Hi, Robin. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing all right. It's been a while since it's just been the two of us.
It really has. Wow, I've really missed having our conversations.
Yeah, it's always been interesting and, I'm glad to be back.
Me too. Me too.
Well, this show will be different this week. And that's because we realized that the audience knows very little about you from listening to the show. So this week, we decided that we will be interviewing you.
Boy, oh wow.
Are you excited?
I am. I am. It's interesting being on the other side of the table. But yes, I
Yeah,
am
it
interested. I
is.
am excited about this.
Okay, then let's get started. So tell me about you. Who is Robin Lofton?
Well, that is an easy question. And I guess my short answer to that is don't know exactly. But and that's why I think, maybe some of the audience, it was by design that we didn't find out much about me. I'm an introvert too, and I wanted to focus more on the content and the issues rather than on me. But, I'm happy to tell more about myself and who I am, and I'm a work in progress, I guess, like we all are. But to give some backstory, I was born and raised in Oakland, California, and actually a smallish town just outside of Oakland called El Cerrito. Went to El Cerrito High School, got my BA in history at UCLA, which had been a lifelong dream for me. And then law school at University of Pennsylvania. And so I went to the East Coast, and that was another experience. After I got my law degree, my family got a law firm which specialized in elder law, and I went and worked with them for a long time. Well, a long time, maybe 3 or 4 years. Wasn't interested in doing that, but law firm jobs were hard to find, and actually, I went more corporate. But those hard jobs were hard to find. Um, but I was interested in human rights law. And as I was working with them, I realized that we were working with senior citizens and helping them, that this was human rights. And so this just felt really great to me to do. Um, I wanted to go a little deeper, so I did study human rights law a little deeper. So I moved to the Netherlands to study international human rights law with the professor whom I've been wanting to meet for years and years. So that was a real privilege for me. Um, then afterwards, uh, let's see, I moved to, let's see, I went to the Netherlands, and then I got married, moved to London, and I've been living in Europe ever since. But what do I like to do? I think ETT listeners know that I'm a huge reader. I love to read just about everything. I love learning. I'm curious about everything. And yeah, and I love podcasting. I didn't think I would, but I really do. And so that's kind of who I am. So, oh, I love history too. You guys know I love history, right? So, but I just had to
I
say
mean, you majored in history, so that was a
it. Well, a lot of people finish their majors hating that subject, but I
that's
came out
true.
loving it more.
Well, I know this isn't about me, but I will say this. I also majored in history in college, so
Well,
something we have in common.
that is. And on next time we interview, I want to know more about that, Hans.
Yeah.
You're holding back. You're holding back.
I try to.
I did too. Yes. So, okay.
Oh, well, that's very interesting. But now you currently live in Belgium. And I think I'm curious, and I'm sure the audience is curious also, but how and why did you move to Belgium?
Um, Well, that's kind of a lifelong story, which I will condense down, really short. That I've actually always seen myself living in Europe, not necessarily Belgium, but I knew that I was going to leave the United States. Much as I loved El Cerrito, I loved Oakland, loved living in the United States, I was always looking for other shores. And so after I got my master's in law in the Netherlands, yeah, I said I moved to London for work, and I was running an NGO at that time. Then moved on to Sweden, where I was continuing working. But my job then brought me to Belgium, and we were only supposed to stay here for maybe a year, and that was in 1997, and we're still here. So yeah, it was basically work that is studying and work that took us around to Belgium. Yeah, that's a short answer, I think.
Okay, cool. And you are from the United States, but you're currently living in Europe, and obviously the podcast focuses on relations between African Americans, Black people around the world, in the United States. But I wanted to get your perspective. How do you see race relations in the United States versus, in Europe? Like, what do you see from your perspective, having lived in both?
Well, my big answer to that is that racism exists everywhere. That there is, Belgium likes to put itself out as being a colorblind society. And I think in some ways it's even written into the law. It is not. And race is a factor in many interactions. And yeah, racism, yeah, as I said, exists everywhere. It's handled differently in some ways. In the United States, I mean, it was founded and built on racism and on white supremacy, and that was never really discussed, or there hasn't been a reckoning on that with everything that we've gone through with the civil rights movement, ending slavery with the civil rights movement, and all these other things. Race is still very much on people's mind, and it's still a major factor in people's lives, particularly Black people. Um, Belgium has a history too with Leopold II and with colonialism, which also there hasn't been a reckoning with that either. That okay, maybe to be fair, there's been not an apology, but an acknowledgement that 10 million people were killed. Okay.
That's
Um,
something.
yeah, something, but not quite enough. Oh, and was it Patrice Lumumba's tooth was just returned.
Right.
Um, but in the United States, I worry about violence, racial violence a lot more. Um, yeah, in Belgium, I don't worry about that as much, though I know it does happen to a lesser extent. Um, and in Belgium, they're a lot more vocal about certain things. For instance, I was at a hospital and a nurse was trying to take blood, and she was having trouble finding a vein. Now, I have fantastic veins. No one's ever had trouble with that with me. She did. And she said, "Oh, well, that's because Black people have such thick skin." And I thought,
Oh,
now how can she say something like that? In the US, you wouldn't be able to say it. She might be thinking it, she might be acting on it, but in Belgium, she can say it, she can act on it, she can think it, and she can, spread it. So there is a difference. And I guess the thing I just have to wrap up with that racism exists everywhere in
yeah.
both countries, not getting away from it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting, and thank you for sharing that with us. But now let's switch to Espresso Talk today.
oh, okay.
You are a co-founder with Doug Lofton. So, I think it's been more than 3 years now.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask you, so why did you and Doug start Espresso Talk today?
Oh boy. Wow. I mean, I really have to smile when I think about, how and why Doug and I decided to start Espresso Talk today. And I say Doug and I have always, he's my big brother, 3 years older than me. And we've always had legendary talks about everything. We talked about history, philosophy, books, stuffed animals. I mean, we just talked about everything. And we would talk in cafes and restaurants, walks. What I understand too, Doug is a big talker, so he gets people talking, and yeah, yeah, and he's a good listener too. Um, but sometimes, and it's kind of interesting. Sometimes people, if we were at a cafe, would join into our conversations. They would hear us talking, and they would want to join in. Sometimes we didn't let them. Sometimes we did. But what we found was that people were interested in these subjects, and when we let them join in, it really took the talk to a different level. So, Doug, I had been podcasting already for a few years on Black history. Doug had been teaching classes, and we decided that with our backgrounds and our experiences, that maybe we could start our own podcast. I think we were just going to do it for fun, and
Yeah.
yeah, and it started off that way. Then it's kind of we kind of our first one, for instance, Doug brought up it was about the Harvard photos of enslaved people at
Oh
Harvard at
yeah.
yeah from the 1800s and all of that, and where they were keeping them and they were have been using them for profit and all of that, and the family was trying to get them back. Harvard was not giving them up. That law, that case is still going on. But yeah, so we did that. That was our very first one, and after that, it just kind of snowballed, and it became less that we're just going to be talking to each other about various different issues, and more that we can talk about some serious issues that affect the Black community and affect us directly too. And so I guess that's how it got started and how it kept going. So
Wow. Good old times. I'm getting flashbacks and memories here.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, how does living in Belgium affect your perspective and your content creation process?
Wow. Hmm. My perspective. Well, it's mostly what I'm focusing on does happen in the US. I feel like I'm watching, I have various different sources and news sources, some mainstream, some not mainstream, and some very not mainstream. And I feel like that gives me a good perspective to watch from the outside what's happening. And and with that, I guess it ideas come up. I think it's I'm not on the ground, which sometimes I feel very guilty about and that I really miss. So I'm not on the ground. I'm seeing having the view from above and kind of ideas that come to me, issues that come to me. Um, like thinking about healthcare. Um, in the United Healthcare, of course, is a huge issue in both countries, everywhere, but it's approached completely differently in the U.S. And I find in Belgium, isn't even about race, that healthcare is very high quality, very personal, and it's really really affordable. I mean, in the U.S., it's just not even. It's off the charts. When I go to visit the U.S., I always think make sure I have insurance in case something happens. So yeah, I guess I just see I'm able to compare things a lot more directly. I'm able to get a view from the top, and that gives me ideas and perspectives that I think I couldn't have if I was, sitting right there in the country. But I will say I do miss being, when the George Floyd protests were going on and with the Michael Brown protests in Ferguson. I mean, I miss uh, being there. I feel like I want to be on the ground. I want to be involved. I don't just want to sit back in my chair and be some kind of a slacktivist and just watch what's
Yeah.
happening from a distance. So that's another reason it drives me more to do Espresso Talk today, to to make sure that I am doing something. Writing is something, and podcasting is something, and focusing on these issues is something, and that's important. So yeah.
Nice. Now, obviously you've been doing Espresso Talk Today for 3 years now. Well, I think more than 3 years. But is there any surprises that happened to you while you were making the show? Like, did anything just like, oh wow, this is a little crazy, or I didn't expect that.
A lot, yeah, and it's almost on a daily basis. But I would think that certainly the technology, that it was so much further ahead than I thought. Um, the communication software, maybe during the lockdown and all this, was using Zoom, and yeah, the quality was it made it very possible for us. Especially, I was in Belgium, and Doug was in California, and I mean, in the beginning, you had to
I'm
choose.
sorry, there must have been some time difference.
Absolutely. Yes, 9 hours.
Oh
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. So often either Doug was up early or I was up late. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so that was difficult. It's easier with you being in New York. So yeah.
Yeah.
But the videos, the software we would use, you either had to choose between an excellent video quality or good sound. And now you don't have to. Now you can just get both, and it's very affordable. And that to me, was a big surprise. It took some time to learn to use it really effectively, but it was but that was one surprise. But a bigger one, I think, I don't know why I mentioned the second because this other one was really big, was that after Doug passed, um, my other family members volunteered to join the show because I was wondering how am I going to do this? Just just one person or just you and I doing it, which was great, but I needed more people. But other people joined in. My son, my cousins, nieces, close friends of Doug's called up and said they want to join in. Even my mother and that was just a really wonderful experience and surprise. They're young and they're old and they're knowledgeable, radical, conservative, but they're all interested in these issues and they sought me out to really become a part of it. And that just showed I just so impressed and feel so loved and supported by my family that they did that. And I mean, it just makes me teary-eyed thinking about how they stepped in and stepped up when they're working full-time jobs and they still did it. So,
Yeah.
so I really
It
appreciate
yeah, and it really makes you appreciate that support system that you have around you. Sometimes we take that for granted, but we have people around us that love us and are willing to help us in anything. So,
it. Perfectly put, and that I hadn't even realized it until,
yeah.
yeah. So,
Well, now that PT Expresso Talk today has come so far, um,
mhm.
what are the next steps for the podcast for ETT?
The next steps, keep it going. So far, we haven't missed a single Friday in 3 years. So, yeah, I'm very, very proud of that.
Yeah.
Over 170 episodes. Uh, but I want to expand it too. One thing I've always wanted, and not just with ETT, but in my whole life, has been a bookstore. Surprise! I'm not a surprise to everybody, I'm sure. Yeah, and so we're going to add a bookstore to this because I think books do add a great dimension to it, and we're going to start doing book readings as well. Um, what's next? Yeah, that and add in music, art, bring in artists as well, musicians too, kind of make the bookstore a hub for the community to kind of just there can be a gathering around the bookstore because I really want ETT to expand into a community. And community is so important. I'm realizing family is very important. Community is so important. So yeah, evolving it into that with the bookstore as at the center.
Wow, that's very fun,
Mhm.
have a little community section for people to get away from I guess from everything, but and ETT serve as that hub.
That's
So,
right. Yeah.
well, Robin, thank you for taking the time to tell the audience and myself a little bit about you. You are a very interesting character, and I hope many can learn from your life story and ambitions. Well, that wraps up our show for this week and for this season. Expresso Talk today will be back for season 4. We will let you know when it happens and we will catch you then. Ciao.
Bye, Han. Thanks. And thank you too, dear community. So, see you next week. See you next season. And remember, now more than ever, strength, soul, and reparations. Ashe.